Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ayomide, and in this video I'm going to be showing you guys how I make my best-selling cat beanies. I'm going to be showing you guys how to make one with 8 squares like this one, and then I'm also going to be showing you guys how to make 6 squares like this one. So for this tutorial I'm going to be using weight 4 medium weight. And I usually use just any brand, but for this one I'm going to be using weight 4 yarn. You're going to want to use a 6mm size hook, as well as a pair of scissors and darning needle. Start off by making a magic ring. Stick your hook through, pull it, and then chain 1. Readjust your fingers and then chain 2 more, making a total of 3 chains. Then we're going to yarn over and do 1 double crochet, yarn over, do a double crochet, chain 2, and then we're going to do another 3 double crochets. Chain 2 again, and then do another 3 double crochets. Chain 2 one more time, and then we're going to make 3 double crochets, making a total of 12 double crochets for your first row. After you finish making all your double crochets, you're going to want to pull your yarn tight, chain 2, and then stick your hook into the 3rd chain, chain 1, and cut off your yarn, making a tail long enough for us to be able to weave in the next row. For the second row, you're going to want to make a slip knot. Stick your hook through the first hole and pull the yarn through and chain 3. Then we're going to yarn over and do 2 double crochets. Chain 1. Make sure we have a hold of that yarn and do 3 double crochets in the next hole. Chain 2 and do another 3 double crochets. Chain 1, do 3 double crochets in the next hole. Chain 2 and do another 3. So I'm assuming that you guys can see the pattern. In every corner you're going to want to do 3 double crochets, chain 2, and do another 3. Coming back to our last corner, we're going to chain 1, double crochet 3 into the same hole, chain 2, and then slip stitch into the 3rd chain. Then we're going to chain 1 and cut off the yarn. That is going to be our second row in the granny square. Next we're going to do our 3rd row. We're going to do a slip knot, put the hook through, pull the yarn through the first hole and chain 3. Then we're going to yarn over, do 2 double crochets, making sure that we have those strings behind tucked in while we're crocheting. Chain 1, do another 3 double crochets in the next hole. And since this is in a corner, we are going to be chaining 1 again and going into the next hole. Chain 2 and do another 3 double crochets, making 6 total double crochets in that one corner. Now we're coming back to the beginning. We're going to chain 1 and do 3 double crochets into that same hole, chaining 2 and doing a slip knot into the 3rd chain, chain 1 and cut off the yarn. And that is it for our 3rd row. Now we're gonna go ahead and do one more row of granny square stitch, repeating the same pattern, chaining 3 into the first hole, doing 2 double crochets, chain 1 and do another 3, and then when you get to the corner we're going to do 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets and then chain 1, continuing this pattern until we are at the beginning again. Now that we are back where we started, you're going to want to do 3 more double crochets, chain 2, slip stitch into the 3rd chain, chain 1 and cut off our yarn. And that is it for our granny squares. If you're doing 6 squares, you're going to want to do 5 more of these, and if you're doing 8 squares, you're going to want to do 7 more of these. We're just going to make sure that we're tugging on those strings to keep them secured. Now we're back with your desired number of squares. For the first square, we're going to want to do one more row of granny square stitches. And this is only for the first square. So you can come back once that first square is completely finished with your border color. Now we're back with the first square done, 5 rows, and for your second square you're just going to want to do one side of the square. We're coming up on that corner. You're just going to want to do 3 double crochets, this is where we're going to start joining with the second square. So you're going to want to chain 1, remove your hook and slip it through the first hole, put the yarn over your hook and loop it over, chain 1 again, and then we're going to do 3 double crochets, making sure that we have that piece of yarn tucked in while we're doing our double crochets. After that, you're going to want to chain 1, insert your hook into the second hole, pull it through, yarn over and do 3 more double crochets. So the pattern is you do 3 double crochets, chain 1, insert your hook into the hole and pull through while doing another 3 double crochets into the next hole. Chain 1 again, insert your hook into the next hole, pull through, and do 3 more double crochets. When we get to the corner, you're going to want to chain 1, put your hook through, pull through, chain 1 again, and then do 3 double crochets and finish off the square like we're doing a normal granny square stitch. We are now back to where we started. You're going to want to double crochet 3 into that same corner, chain 2, put your hook through the 3rd chain, chain 1, and cut off our yarn. Now we have successfully joined 2 squares together. For our 3rd square, we are actually going to be doing the same exact thing we did for joining our first and second square. You're going to want to pause the video right here to do that first side of the square and come back when you've gotten to the second corner. Now we are going to be joining from this end where the string is. I've already chained 1, pulled it through, chain 1 again since it's a corner, and then I'm going to do my 3 double crochets. Chain 1, put the hook through the first square, pull through, and then do another 3 double crochets and chain 1 again, repeating the same process until we get to the corner. Now we're back to the corner. We're going to chain 1, pull the yarn through, chain 1 again, and then do 3 double crochets and continue doing our granny square stitch. We have now successfully joined 3 squares together, and for this 4th square we are going to start off like how we've been doing it before. We're going to do one side of the square and then we're going to join it, but the only difference is that instead of just joining it on one side, we are going to be joining it from 2 sides. Now we're coming back to our third corner. We're going to want to do 3 double crochets in that corner and then chain 1. Then we're going to fold our work so that we are lined up with the first corner. Pull the yarn through the hole and then chain 1. And then do our 3 double crochets connecting the squares like how we've been doing them before. And then for our last corner, we're going to want to do 3 double crochets, chain 1, put the hook through, pull the yarn through, chain 1 again, and then put our hook through the first stitch, chaining 1, and then cutting off our yarn. And this is the part where I'm going to be explaining it for those who want to do a hat with 6 squares. I'm going to put a timestamp for those who are looking to join the 8 squares because it is a little bit different how I join the top for the 2 of them. Alright, so for those who want to do the 6 squares, we're going to want to do that same side, that same one side like we've been doing before, and we are going to be joining this time from where we cut off our yarn last. So it's going to be that top right corner where we are going to be joining this square. Chain 1 and then put our hook through that hole right there, right where my finger is. That's where you want to put your hook. Pull through, chain 1, and then do our 3 double crochet joining like we've been doing. And then coming back to this corner, we are going to want to double crochet 3, chain 1, and then we are going to flip our project so that there's a square behind it. We're going to flip it like that, and then we are going to put our hook through that first hole, joining those 2 sides together. Chain 1 and then do 3 double crochets, repeating that same pattern until we get to the end. Now that we're back to the end of our corner, we're going to want to double crochet 3 and then chain 1, put the hook through that last hole, chain 1 again, and then we're going to put our hook through the first stitch, making a slipped stitch, and then chaining 1 and cutting off our yarn, leaving a tail that's long enough for us to be able to use our darning needle to close that gap. Next, we are going to want to do that same side. We're basically going to be doing the same thing as the other square. and be joining from this side. When you get to around the corner of this, we're going to want to double crochet 3 and then chain 1, putting our hook through that last hole, chain 1 again, and then putting our hook through the whole diagonal or like adjacent to the square. And then we're going to want to do 3 double crochets into the square. And we're just going to continue the pattern using the granny stitch to join the 2 squares together. We're back to that same corner where we're going to want to do 3 double crochets, chain 1, put our hook through that next hole, chain 1 again, and then put our hook through the hole next to it, pulling our yarn through and then doing 3 more double crochets using the granny stitch to finish up. Doing our last 3 double crochets, chain 1, put our hook through that last hole, and then pulling our yarn through. Chain 1 again and put our hook through that first stitch, chain 1, and then cutting off long enough to be able to weave in that gap. Now we're successfully done making our 6 square granny square stitch hat. We are going to want to flip our project inside out and start weaving in those ends. You're going to want to take your darning needle and pull it through the yarn, and you're just going to want to fold your project in half and just try to weave your yarn through those stitches, closing up that gap on the side. After I'm finished weaving in my yarn, I like to go ahead and use my darning needle to split the yarn in half, and then I weave one side into, like, I don't know how to explain it, like just a little hole or stitch, just separating the two. And then I like to tie my yarn 3 times before I go ahead and cut it off. If you weaved in your yarn while you were crocheting, they should be good for the most part, but I will show you guys towards the end of the video how I weave in the ends for the middle. So in this section we are going to be going over how I do the 8 squares. We're gonna want to start off with those first 4 already stitched together, and then we're gonna do 2 sides of the first square, attaching it to the top of where our last string was. Pull through and then chain 1, and then we're gonna make sure that we have that piece of yarn under when we're working on our double crochets. So I'm gonna do 3 double crochets, chain 1, put my hook through, pull through, and do 3 more double crochets, and then we can go ahead and finish up that square. Chain 1 and then cut off your yarn, pull that yarn through. For your next square, you're gonna want to do that one side already, and we are going to attach it to the top of our last square. Chain 1, and then make sure we are weaving that end through. Now we're at that last corner. We're gonna want to double crochet 3, chain 1, put our hook through that first hole, chain 1 again, and then put the hook through that next hole right there. And then after that, doing 3 double crochets and repeating the granny stitch, joining the top and the bottom. Now we have successfully finished one side. We are going to start working on the back side of the top of the hat. So we're going to flip our project over, and then we're going to get that square, and we're going to want to start double crocheting from the side that's left of our string. You can pause the video and come back when you are done with that one side. Now we are going to be joining in from the top left corner, chain 1, and then basically use the granny stitch to stitch those squares together. In this corner, we're going to chain 1, pull the hook through, chain 1 again, and then turn our work so we are working in that corner as well. Pull the yarn through and then do our 3 double crochets. Until we've reached the end. Now we are at the end. We're going to do our last 3 double crochets. Chain 1, pull the yarn through that hole, chain 1 again, and then put your hook through the first stitch in that corner. Then chain 1 and cut our yarn. Pull through, securing that. And then now we are going to be working on our last square. For this square, we are going to be starting in from that inner corner that's in the middle of all the squares, and we are going to be starting from the end that's diagonal of that string. The one I'm pointing to right now, that's the corner that we're going to be starting with. So in that corner, you're going to want to chain 3 and then do our first cluster, but then after that you are going to want to start joining, because that is going to be the last square, so we're going to be joining in from all sides. So chaining 3, doing our 2 double crochets, chain 1, and then putting our hook through that second hole right there, then doing 3 double crochets, chain 1, and do 3 more double crochets, chaining 1 and then pulling our yarn through, doing 3 more double crochets, and then we're going to be doing this until we get to that middle corner. So we're going to do 3 double crochets in this corner, chain 1, put the hook through that first hole, chain 1 again, and then putting our hook through that hole right behind, pulling it through, and then doing 3 double crochets using the granny stitch to connect the squares together. And you're gonna do this for all the corners. We're now coming back to that middle stitch where we're gonna pull our hook through, doing that last 3 double crochets right in the middle, chain 1, and then put our hook through that hole right there, chaining 1 again, and then putting our hook through the whole diagonal, and then we are going to slip stitch into the first stitch in our last square. Chaining 1, and then cutting our yarn. Now we are successfully done with our 8 square hat. You're going to want to make sure all those ends are on the wrong side of the hat. So as you see, I'm using my hook to pull that through, and then we are going to flip the hat inside out so we can start cutting and weaving in those ends. You're going to want to find one of the middles has 2 strings. You're going to want to tie those 2 together 3 times just to secure all those squares together. for the middle of the squares, you're going to want to pull it tight. You're going to want to pull that magic ring really tight and try to split that yarn in half, like so. And then you're going to use your darning needle to weave one end through just the back of one of the stitches, like so, just to separate the two from being in the same stitch. And then we're gonna tie those 3 times, and I do this for all the magic rings just to secure everything, and I try not to cut them too short. Make sure you're pulling real tight on those strings before you cut them. And again, I try not to pull them I try not to cut them too short. So there you have it, guys. This is our hat. And this is what they should basically look like after you've cut and weaved in all your ends. Very neat, very tidy, very cute. And thank you guys for watching my tutorial on how I make my granny square cat beanies.